Stages Houston is always putting on amazing performances, and Das Barbecue is no different. This comedy is going to have you stomping your feet, slapping your knees, and laughing out loud. It reimagines Wagner's epic music drama, The Ring Cycle, as a hilarious Texas hootenanny. By the way, I've always wanted to say hootenanny out loud. Say it with me, hootenanny. Das Barbecue is playing now through June 1st, so get your tickets and watch 5 incredible actors transformed into over 30 outrageous characters. Hold on to your hats, y'all, and get your tickets at stageshouston.com today. Today on CityCast Houston, we're saying goodbye to a local news organization that's closing its doors this week, the Houston Landing. You're going to hear some familiar voices from the Landing, but first, I'm bringing on Michael Hardy at Texas Monthly, who's followed the Landing's rise and fall. Before we get started, head to houston.citycast.fm or check out our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, for the CityCast Houston Summer Road Trippin' Guide. It's live this week. Today's featured destination is Navasota, Texas. This isn't just your average detour. It's a full-on experience. Navasota has it all. Live music on the rooftops, amazing free events like the Sounds of Navasota concert series, and so much more. It's a quick trip from Houston, but you'll make big memories. Navasota is the perfect mix of small town charm and big fun. Plan your trip at visitnavasota.com. It's Tuesday, May 13th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. The Houston Landing launched with such a bang, Michael. $20 million, so many talented reporters and people behind the scenes. And Houston is a huge place with so many important stories, and now it's closing down. What went wrong, Michael?
Well, it's a real shame what's happening with the Landing. It made a big contribution to the city of Houston. It had so many talented journalists. And as a fellow journalist, it's heartbreaking to see so many talented people lose their jobs all at once. And for the city to lose a really crucial news source. There are lots of reasons for what happened. You know, we can get into those. You know, it's really sort of incredible, and it's received national coverage that, as you said, an organization that raised $20 million closes after 3 years. This is really, I think, unprecedented in the realm of nonprofit news organizations. So it's worth looking into what happened. I think this is going to be a case study in journalism graduate schools for decades to come.
Yeah, and it was only 2 years of publishing. So let's dig into the reasons, right? Give me like the top reasons that come to mind.
Well, there was a lot of turnover at the top of this organization. In the initial CEO was Scott McClelland, who local listeners will know was the longtime leader of HEB in Houston. He's very well known. He was on commercials with J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he had to step down for personal reasons just a few weeks before the site launched. And he was hurriedly replaced by a man named Peter Bhatia, who was an experienced newspaper editor. He had just most recently been the editor-in-chief of the Detroit Free Press. And he ended up not being the best fit for the job. He didn't really know Houston that well. He had a lot of experience in print newspapers, but not any experience in online-only publications. Also, no experience in nonprofit journalism. So he almost immediately started clashing with the editor-in-chief and the top investigative reporter, which is Mizanur Rahman and Alex Stuckey, and ended up firing them about 6 months into his time at the head of the organization. So within a very quick span of time, within the first year, basically, the organization had lost its CEO, its editor-in-chief, and its top Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter. That is a lot of turnover for a small, new organization.
Yeah, that's hard to navigate as you're trying to make it. And with that turnover at the top, do you think it set up the Houston Landing to fail, or could they have still made it work?
They potentially could have made it work. There were also other problems, of course. They were spending money very quickly. They started with $20 million, but they spent $5.5 million in 2023. They spent almost $8 million in 2024. That was $2 million more than they took in last year.
Oh, wow.
So they're spending faster than they are collecting money, and they're hiring very fast. Right now, they have around 43 employees, all of whom are being laid off. That's quite large for a new nonprofit newsroom. And they hired very quickly, too quickly, I think, before they really had a sustainable plan for the audience and the kind of identity they wanted to have.
I want to take a step back and talk about their mission, right? Before we get into what they could have done differently. What was their mission?
So the way they defined their mission was to contribute to the overall journalism ecosystem of Houston and to really be a civic institution that would benefit Houstonians through, providing more coverage of really critical issues like the state takeover of HISD, the new superintendent, Mike Miles. They did great work on trains stopping in the East End, causing all kinds of problems. They saw themselves as kind of like an investigative watchdog. But the problem is Houston already has several of those, and they're very well established and they're very good. I mean, the Houston Chronicle is arguably the best newspaper in the state. It just won its third Pulitzer Prize. It also has Houston Public Media.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Monthly, covers Houston. There's local news stations. It was not a news desert. There were news outlets here. And I think it never really found its niche for where it was going to fit in and what it was going to do differently than the existing news organizations here.
Yeah, we also have us here at CityCast Houston. Do you think if they had maybe shifted their mission and maybe leaned into something else? Because, for example, their diverse communities reporting was something that I hadn't seen in the city, right? Being a minority and seeing stories written about us like at that level was pretty cool. Like, could it have been just a shift maybe that helped them survive here?
I think if they had leaned into that, or leaned into education coverage, or leaned into, environmental justice, if they had chosen an identity and really focused on it, and really established their authority in an area, then I think it might have broken through. But I think an instructive contrast is the Texas Tribune, which is the statewide nonprofit news site that launched in 2009. From the very beginning, the Texas Tribune knew what its identity was and who its audience was. It was going to cover the Texas legislature and Texas politics and policy better than anyone else. It was going to really go deep on that. And as a result, it built a very large audience of Texas insiders, politicos, policy wonks, and it kind of built on that. The Houston Landing from the beginning had kind of an amorphous mission.
Is there anything that they could have done differently to make this work from a nonprofit newsroom standpoint?
Well, they could have chosen not to pay their CEO $450,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
I think that a grossly disproportionate salary to the size of the organization. My reporting suggests that Peter Bhatia was not necessarily doing all the fundraising that he should have been doing, or was trying to, but simply was not successful enough at it. So they had a cash problem. They started with a whole lot of money, and in the end, actually, it might have been too much money because they felt free to sort of spend money willy-nilly, hire very fast, pay enormous salary to their top executives. And I mean, any organization that starts with $20 million and goes out of business in 3 years, something went wrong.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that in just a second. What was their plan on making money, right? Again, a nonprofit newsroom. Was it just going to those fundraisers and organizations and charitable organizations and getting funding from there? Was there any kind of revenue source in their plan?
Well, like most nonprofit newsrooms, they were trying to build multiple revenue streams. Yes, they were counting on continued support from these charitable foundations, but they were also trying to raise subscriber revenue. It was a free site, but they were encouraging people to sort of subscribe and get maybe insider access to some of their content, access to some of their reporters. But they only were able to raise $80,000 last year in subscriber revenue. I mean, that's unfortunately, it's a drop in the bucket when you're dealing with an organization of this size. they were also never really able to get their events up and running. Texas Tribune makes a huge amount of its revenue from the Texas Tribune Festival, which is a huge deal every year. It's kind of like South by Southwest for policy wonks.
Trip Fest.
Trip Fest, exactly. Houston Landing might have developed something like that in time, but they didn't. And that left them vulnerable to someone like Arnold Ventures, which is the philanthropic arm of Houston billionaires John and Laura Arnold. They pulled their funding abruptly a few months ago. And that really, I think, was the beginning of the end for the Landing. The Landing had counted on the continuing support of Arnold Ventures. And when that went away, I think it became clear that they just didn't have a future.
Yeah, we learned in March that Arnold Ventures decided back in December to not provide any more funding for the Landing. And that was kind of the writing on the wall for a lot of people, who are really dialed in on this, like, oh, things are not looking good at the Houston Landing. And, I keep going back to this as a fan of the Houston Landing. And again, we're going to hear from some of the journalists at the Houston Landing in this episode. They've been on CityCast Houston as well. But I keep going back to this moment, right? You mentioned the turnover at the top and those early firings. The staff basically revolted against Peter Bhatia, the CEO.
Yes.
Did that have any impact on the success of the Landing, for better or worse?
That was a really fraught moment for the Landing. And I covered that at the time for Texas Monthly. Peter Bhatia was relatively new. He had been brought in from the Detroit Free Press, where he had recently retired. And he started clashing with the editor-in-chief, Mizanur Rahman, who was a very well-respected editor at the Houston Chronicle. The Houston Landing had hired him away from the Chronicle, had also hired away Alex Stuckey and made her the Landing's top investigative reporter. And he fairly abruptly fired both of them on the same day. They were both really well-liked on staff. So regardless of, you can say, he made a right decision, he made a wrong decision, the staff turned against him. I talked to a number of the staff off the record. They were extremely unhappy. They immediately started to organize a union, which they did. But I don't think trust between management and the reporters ever recovered from that. Bhatia was eventually able to bring in a very well-regarded editor-in-chief, Manny Garcia, from the Austin American-Statesman. But the way that the firings of Mizanur and Alex happened left a sour taste in really everyone's mouth.
That happens at media organizations. I've worked at plenty of media companies. Talent might not like the people at the top, right? And you make things work. But just seemed like as the CEO, even with that relationship being as contentious as it was, there was still good work being done. Did it just come down to money?
Yeah.
Like they just couldn't catch fire with money? Like that is such a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I think it did come down to money, but you have to ask the question, why did Arnold Ventures pull the money in the first place? And from my reporting and from other outlets reporting on this, the Arnolds, became disillusioned and disappointed with the impact that the Houston Landing was having. I mean, unfortunately, one thing that I kept hearing in social media when the news of the Landing closing came out was, I've never heard of this organization before. I've heard a lot of Houstonians say that. I read the Chronicle every day. I watch local news, and I had never heard of the Landing. Now, I read the Landing. You read the Landing. People in media read the Landing, but it's not clear that they really broke through to a larger audience. And it's also not clear that they differentiated themselves sufficiently from the Chronicle and from other news outlets like HPM, like CityCast. So I think those were all problems. And essentially, the Arnolds and some of the other funders just kind of lost faith in the organization.
Ready to escape the city this summer? Hit the road and head to Navasota, Texas, where you'll find authentic charm and bold experiences. Navasota's just outside of Houston, and they have live music on the rooftop, fantastic shopping, and of course, Texas flavors. Kick off your 4th of July at the Freedom Festival with food trucks, fireworks, and a live performance by the Texas Eagles Band. And if live music is your thing, you'll love the Sounds of Navasota concert series, featuring live music under the stars. The best part, these events are free. Navasota also has a historic downtown with one-of-a-kind shopping, and at their Sip and Shop event, you can stroll, sip, and support local businesses. And for my foodies, they have so many great restaurants and wineries. This isn't your average detour, it's a full-on experience. Make your summer road trip count. Plan your getaway today at visitnavasota.com. Y'all, the Sunday Scaries are a real thing, and one way I avoid them is by joining my fellow Houstonians for Jazzy Sundays in the Park. This is one of my favorite events because my wife and I get to sit back and take in some great jazz performances while our daughters hang out with kids from across the city. This is truly a community event celebrating H-Town, and it's all free. Jazzy Sundays in the Park is going to be at the Waterworks Lawn at Buffalo Bayou Park all month long before it wraps up for this year's season. Performances are from 5 to 7 p.m., so it's the perfect way to end your weekend on a high note and soak up our city's vibrant culture and jazz heritage. You've got to come check out these great local musicians. So grab a blanket and some chairs, pack your picnics, and head to Jazzy Sundays in the Park. Find the full schedule of performances at buffalobayou.org. That's buffalobayou.org. I know a lot of people didn't know about the landing, but as you mentioned, you and I love their stories. And I want to play these clips from some of the Houston Landing reporters on stories they're most proud of and stories they felt like that made a true impact here in our community.
I'm Asher Lair Small, and I covered Houston ISD at the Landing. The story probably that I'm most proud of is an investigation into schools illegally suspending students experiencing homelessness. I found that over the past few years, hundreds of schools have illegally suspended thousands of homeless students, and the story actually triggered the state to beef up its tracking and enforcement of a law that was passed in 2019 to protect homeless students from being kicked off campus unnecessarily. And the story also, not that awards matter, but earned some recognition as a Livingston finalist and a silver medal from the Texas Managing Editors Association as a Star Investigative Report of the Year and a gold medal for community service. So that was really cool to see those come through, even though the most important thing was the impact that it had on some of the practice and policy here in Texas.
Hi, my name is Lexi Parra, and I am the co-director of visuals for the Houston Landing. My most proud moment, probably, was being able to go with a family, a man who is based here in Houston, and follow him all the way to the border in McAllen and Reynosa, Mexico, to be able to witness, document, and share the reunification of his family with him back in November through the CBP One app. I covered a little bit of everything from cultural events, breaking news, but really the biggest thing for me was covering the stories of immigrants here, the sacrifices, the fight, and the hope for something better. We're in a really tough time right now, and I just want to share all of my strength with those communities, and it was really an honor to be able to be a part of telling your stories.
Hi, my name's Paul Cobbler, and I covered politics for the Houston Landing. The story I'm most proud of from my time at the Landing was my coverage of the sexual misconduct allegations against Pervez Agwan's congressional campaign. The story I published in January of 2024 was the most difficult piece of accountability reporting that I've ever done. However, it shed lights on the events within the campaign in the fall of 2023, and it gave a voice to the accusers who were threatened and silenced.
Hi, I'm Monique Welch, a diverse communities reporter with the Houston Landing. One of my all-time favorites was the story I did on a Houston midwife and the work she's doing to kind of combat the crisis we see here. Shocking to me, I was able to witness a live birth, a home birth, and just really be a fly on the wall in that process. It was the excitement of a lifetime. I've never seen a birth in general. Then to do this for work, it was insane. So to kind of develop that intimacy and be trusted in that way was kind of one of the highlights of my career, truly, but also definitely my time at the Landing.
What about you, Michael? What stories jumped out to you that had a huge impact?
Well, I think their coverage of the state takeover of HISD was really outstanding. In my opinion, that's the biggest story in Houston and has been for the past few years. And they had some great reporting on that. Their work on Colony Ridge, this community north of Houston, was really excellent. Mm-hmm. Some Alex Stuckey's work on deaths in the Harris County Jail actually led Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez to make some reforms at the jail. So that's a perfect example of fulfilling the landing's stated mission, which was to provide oversight and be a civic, benefit to Houston. So to then turn around and fire her, about a year into the landing's existence, mystified everyone. I still don't understand why they would fire a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter who had done some of the best work.
I think for me, one of the best things that they did, it wasn't a story, but it was the way they would present the stories on why you should care as a Houstonian or why you should care as somebody that lives in this area. I think their tone was fantastic. And I mentioned it earlier, their diverse communities reporting with Monique and Danya Perez was excellent. They were highlighting things that usually got kind of looked over in the media landscape. So, they're definitely going to be missed. And obviously I'm biased here, right? Like with the Houston Landing, because we also had them on our podcast all the time. What do you think the Houston Landing as a publication added to the local news landscape? Not taking into account what I just said, but from you outside looking in, what did they add here?
Well, Houston, I said it's not a news desert, but it's also, not covered the way that New York and Los Angeles are. For the fourth largest city in the country, we have relatively few journalists per capita. And there's so many stories that go uncovered. So any addition to the local media ecosystem is badly needed. Like you said, the diverse communities reporting that they did was really adding a new angle and element and depth to local reporting. That will definitely be missed. Extra eyes on HISD, extra eyes on the county jail. There's only so much that the Chronicle and HPM can do. I have enormous respect for those two organizations and for CityCast and for the local news stations. But there's only so much that they can do. It's going to be a huge loss to Houston. And I do not blame the journalists at all. The journalists did absolutely their best to make this endeavor work. I 100% blame management and the funders. I think there was massive incompetence in management and if not incompetence, then just sort of not knowing what to do among the funders. The funders really did not have a lot of experience, it seems, in funding journalism.
Who do you think will step in and fill this gap, if there is a gap that was left?
Well, there's definitely a gap that was left. There's been some talk of the Texas Tribune absorbing some of the laid off Houston Landing journalists. The Texas Tribune is trying to expand their operations. They're opening a newsroom in Waco, a sort of a locally focused newsroom in Austin. I believe they're hiring a reporter in Houston, but they've been non-committal. The leadership of Texas Tribune has been non-committal about how much of the Landing they can absorb. So we'll see. I mean, unfortunately, this is going to serve as a warning sign to other organizations of what can go wrong. So what I'm worried about is other media organizations thinking about moving to Houston are going to look at this example and say, ooh, we don't want to do that. I mean, that's a really troubling development.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast. We've all set health goals: lose weight, exercise more, eat better. But without a plan, those goals often fade. That may have happened to you. It has definitely happened to me. And that's where Prolon comes in. Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet gives you a science-backed, structured approach to stay on track and see real results. And now Prolon is upping their game with the new next-gen 5-day program, delivering the same science-backed benefits in a cleaner, more convenient, and more flavorful format. Prolon is a plant-based nutrition program featuring soups, snacks, and beverages designed to nourish the body while keeping it in a fasting state, triggering cellular rejuvenation and renewal. Next Gen builds on the original Prolon with 100% organic soups and teas, a richer taste, and ready-to-eat meals. Developed over decades at USC's Longevity Institute and backed by top U.S. medical centers, Prolon has been shown to support biological age reduction, metabolic health, skin appearance, fat loss, and energy. I've been doing the 5-day program, and I feel so much better. I really enjoy the tasty energy bars, the snacks and soups, and the fact that I can enjoy meals, even though the calorie count is super low. The flavors and textures are excellent. An olive oil snack here, broccoli and quinoa soup there, hibiscus tea, a yummy nut bar. It's got the benefits of a 5-day fast, but doesn't have the challenge of doing it with pure liquids. It's a system reset. And also, I know this sounds funny, but it's not. The packaging and directions are fantastic, clear, and well-organized and thoughtful. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering CityCast listeners 15% off site-wide, plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/city. That's PROLONLIFE.com/city to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/city.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Michael, I'm also wondering, do you think if the Houston Landing had maybe invested in a current outlet like the local NPR station, Houston Public Media, you've brought them up a couple of times, maybe partner with the Texas Tribune, maybe working with community outlets like the Defender, would they have been more sustainable and transformative?
I think that's a great question. The funders of the Landing made a decision that rather than contribute to an existing media organization in Houston, they would start a brand new organization from scratch, which, as you know, which your listeners know, is incredibly difficult to do. It requires a lot of money, a lot of know-how. It's very expensive. If they had, instead contributed the same amount of money to Houston Public Media, to the Defender, they could have purchased the Houston Press, which is down to basically one woman running the Houston Press. It was a long time alt weekly here. They could have simply purchased the Press and revived that. That had an existing brand that people knew about. It's very hard to build awareness of a brand new media organization. So I think that made their task that much more difficult. In my opinion, and I even told some of the people involved in the Landing at the beginning, I would have chosen a local or state organization to partner with. I think that would have been a more responsible use of their money.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing all of your reporting. And I think you and I both echo this sentiment that we will miss the Houston Landing, and they did make an impact on us, at least.
Definitely. It was a great run, and I wish the journalists there all the best.
And speaking of those journalists from the Houston Landing, Michael, we definitely want to give them a warm send-off. Many of them moved to Texas to cover our community and fell in love with Houston along the way. Here's what they're going to miss, starting with Asher Layer Small again.
I moved to Houston sight unseen. My girlfriend grew up here. And to be honest, I was kind of expecting, I don't know, from one of those Western movies, like cacti and dust. And Houston really surprised me for the better. We drove in, I'm like, oh my God, there are trees. And not only are there trees, there are huge parks and greenery. And I love going for runs and walks in along Buffalo Bayou or in Memorial Park. And the other thing that I totally fell in love with in Houston is the food. The food is really on another level here. I love going to the plaza off of Hillcroft with all the South Asian food or all sorts of different neighborhood eats, cafes. And then the last thing that made me really, really love Houston is, I grew up in the Northeast where people are kind of standoffish. And I found that Houstonians are genuinely really kind, no frills people. So it's a really wonderful city. And CityCast, y'all asked what I'm going to miss most about reporting here. So here's the good news. I'm not leaving. my girlfriend just matched a medical residency here, so I'm not exactly sure what my next professional steps are yet, but I'm sticking around and I'm hoping to continue covering HISD in some shape or form. Maybe that'll be through freelance or potentially a new role.
Hello, this is Dania Perez, diverse communities reporter for the Houston Landing, at least for now. And it is really easy for me to figure out why I fell in love with Houston. And it's definitely that diversity, being able to go to anywhere, really, even just the grocery store and hear so many languages being spoken, going out to eat and being able to pick amazing food from all over the world. This city really welcomes you no matter where you're from. And I really love that about its people. I'm definitely going to miss it. And I'm very thankful for having been given the opportunity to cover stories that matter to the community here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maggie Gordon, and I was the senior storyteller at the Houston Landing. I love Houston. I'm not from here originally, but I say that all three of my children are native Houstonians, and I intend to raise them here. I think it's a wonderful place where you can be who you are and be really proud of that, and where I have always felt welcome and have learned to be an even more welcoming version of myself just because of how we are here. And I love that about this city. I do plan to stay here. I'm going to continue working in journalism, and I guess I could say you haven't heard the last from me. and I look forward to continuing to tell the stories of this beautiful, crazy, maddening city and what it means to all of us. So thank you for all of your time.
That was Michael Hardy from the Texas Monthly. You can read his whole story on The Landing with the links in our show notes. Also in this episode, you heard from Houston Landing journalists Maggie Gordon, Asher Layer-Small, Dania Perez, Monique Welch, Paul Cobbler, and the co-director of visuals, Lexi Parra. And once again, it's been an absolute honor to work with everyone from the Houston Landing. Please share this episode with 3 friends who love local news. And speaking of local news, let us know how we're doing at CityCast Houston. Drop us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Want more Houston news, life hacks, and must-see events? Then check out our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, with the info in our show notes. Thank you. That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow morning on CityCast Houston.